Hello, I'm Amy from Moonmindology, and today I'm looking at the chart of Prince William. So he is a Sagittarius ascendant with a birth time of 9 p.m. So if you look at the chart, his first ruler, it goes to the 11th house, and that tells me he is very much interconnecting with other people and mixing with other groups of people. He loves charity events, and undoubtedly he does a lot of elbow rubbing, and of course he has been trained that way considering his royal upbringing, so this is unsurprising. But friends are very important to him. And then we move to the 11th house, where you've got Jupiter and Pluto. This combination is very powerful and associated with reviving the dead. So perhaps it could be a literal resurrection of the royal family as the popularity is starting to dwindle. He does have a lot of good luck because this house is all about luck, opportunities. And it's also unearned income. So he makes large sums of money, and he's probably very interested in philanthropic endeavours. He'll have many friends, and they'll be from all over the road, all over the world, not like all over the road. There's a deep interest in politics, and he's also probably very interested in the human condition. So there's a desire to change things for the better, but there can also be a controlling mentality as well. So putting both of these planets together, it can create something that is quite explosive and domineering, as well as slightly megalomaniacal, because those are the properties of Pluto. And when you put Jupiter next to it, it expands all of those things. So he will also probably stick his nose into politics as well all the time, because the 11th house is all about politics, and he will use his power to do what he thinks is right. And I wouldn't be surprised if he flat out, refused to give royal ascension to some laws at some point when he becomes king. But you could instead look at it with some, silver lining and say that actually he's the sort of guy that would uphold the constitution of the people, as in Britain we don't have any written constitution unless you consider the Magna Carta, and it's a little bit out of date. Neptune and Kou, they're in the first house, and this is going to make him quite shy and introverted by nature, and there can be an interest in chemicals such as alcohol, as well as there being a out-of-body feel to him, and so he can feel like he doesn't fit in sometimes as well. But there can also be an attraction to fire and setting fire to things with this placement as well. Not sure how true that is. I did some research, but I couldn't find anything on that. A prince sets fire to stuff. There was no headlines like that, unfortunately. But there can also be an attraction to things that are mysterious, supernatural events that he may witness during his life as well. And he can be incredibly sensitive to his whole world around him. So this can become quite tiring and overwhelming for someone like him to deal with. It's taxing on the body. And sometimes as a defense mechanism, people can just tune out, just detach. And I think that there is an element of that as a coping mechanism, especially with the K2 in the first. So Uranus is in the 12th, and this makes him very security conscious. And, this house is also associated with the military, and he was in the Air Force, which is also linked to Uranus because that's planes and the RAF and so on and so forth, electrics. And he can also have problems with sleep, as this is a disturbing planet in the house of sleep. But they can equally be there could be a lot of foreign travel as well, and some of which can be unexpected and sudden. I don't know whether that has occurred in his life. I imagine that with being in the RAP, he was probably asked to go somewhere off the cuff at times. Uranus is also opposed to Venus, and so this can create unusual relationships, as well as making him someone who certainly needs space. He takes his work and his purpose incredibly seriously, and this can sometimes mean that he is distant in his marriage as well, which can obviously cause tension. Mars and Saturn, that in the 10th, and this is a Dana yoga, it's money, and the 10th house, you know, it's made through, money is made through work and success, and it's sheer willpower and determination that gets him to where he goes. I mean, some would argue that it's from his family. Yes, but he equally works very, very hard, and I can see it from here. You know, it's a great combination for working in the government or government institutions in general. And with Mars here, it really points to military as well. Mars is really, really strong by position, and this planet in the 10th house gets something called Digbala, and this is great for achievement and success and succeeding in his career, which he was always going to do because he's been blessed. But there we go. You know, there's a clear talent in engineering and technical fields as well, but there can be an element of him that's aggressive and bossy, and you know, he's got a strong and forceful personality, and Mars can really start to push that. You know, he's a very serious and hard-working person from what I'm looking at here, and this is a combination of a leader. He's very talented with administrative skills as well as technical skills, as I mentioned before, and he's just, you know, he's a strong leader. This is a leadership combination, as the 10th house is also the father. King Charles was probably difficult, forceful, and there was probably sometimes there was a rift between the two. And if you put Mars and Saturn together, they really, one wants to go forward, one wants to go back. There is a lot of friction there, and it is hard work, it's perseverance, because the whole energy of these two planets existing in this person's chart is about that friction, about rubbing against things, being frustrated. And so people get used to that kind of energy going on, and that probably would have impacted his relationship with his father as well. There's a lot of affliction to the 4th house, and you know, in this case there could be a lot of problems with the mother. You know, in some cases there could have been disagreements. There's a lot of affliction to the 4th house as well, and that shows that there could have been problems with his mother, and there could have been disagreements with her. But I would say for the most part the father was overbearing. He does have some problems with his moon as well, but I'll come to that later, so we can see, you know, that he can have a weakness with the brain and the heart. But there is a link to the 6th house, which is about service, which is very much linked to what he does in the daytime for work. And it could also make him quite interested in health and healing. But there is affliction to the 6th house. So moving on to that house, we've got Venus and Mercury in the 6th, as I said. So this is going to be some work with women, as well as being a sign of popularity. It's all about what he does in the daytime. And with both Mercury and Venus here, you know, he can sweet talk. He's really good at saying the right thing, saying the right word. This combination I would kind of translate to beautiful voice, and beautiful voice in the daytime. So it's literally what he's doing in the day. Venus is incredibly strong here, and that, I would say, it tends towards good health as well as a reduction from trouble with enemies. Because he's got such a lovely 6th house, I don't necessarily think that he would have problems with servants or anything like that causing him issues personally. He will have good servants, and is very interested in media and debate by looking at this. I would say that he has an awful lot of opinions, and he could be considered as arrogant in his personal circles. One thing I want to say, especially in combination with the Saturn and Mars in the 10th house, is I actually looked at that and I found that I got the idea he actually can be quite bullish. So I did a bit of Googling on the back of that, and I did find an old article, But when he was in school, apparently he was being quite forceful with all the other children, and it was like a little scandal when he was like 5 or 6. Of course, everybody was embarrassed because the other children's parents didn't want to say anything because they thought, oh my gosh, this is royalty. And of course, Diana and Charles were equally embarrassed because, you know, it's not good for your reputation. But children will be children. But it just goes to show there is that inclination that he is the sort of person, and I do think that he is still that sort of person looking at this, that he can be quite forceful when he needs to be, which as a leader, I think that's important, to be able to make a decision and tell someone what to do. So I don't necessarily see this as a totally negative thing, but I don't imagine it's always so easy to live with. But that's what I get. I could be wrong. He could have grown out of that. He could have learnt from that. But of course, I think especially with the royal family, we must pay attention to the fact that we've all got a public face and then we've got a private face that we will show people. You know, you see that a lot with celebrities. They show one thing, and I think equally human beings, they, you know, they do different things when they're not being watched. It's just a standard across the board, you know. But moving on, he likes to teach, I would say, and you know, he has to be really careful with nervousness as well, because as I said before, he has a lot of sensitivity, and if he is not careful, this can affect his health. And he's probably 6th house, because you've got Venus here as well. He will probably spend a lot of time traveling in vehicles and cars, but Venus is in his Asthana house, so there can be a problem with women in general, as well as romance. And then we want to look at the Sun, Moon and Rahu in the 7th. First off, the Moon in Ardra. That tells you, you know, there's some problems here. Ardra is very, very tragic as a nakshatra, and it can be associated, you know, with tragedy that gives rise to life lessons. And as a result, you know, these people can really make something out of nothing because they know how to turn a bad situation good. And the moon is really hemmed in between 2 malefics, which can cause problems. The moon is dark, and it has some affliction from Saturn as well. So there's a lot of sadness that we can see that's associated with the mother, and there can be problems with his mental health, depression, oversensitivity. And, you know, his mother probably would have had similar problems and would have felt overwhelmed by Charles, because you've got the sun sitting on the moon, and it just obscures the moon. You can't see the moon. It's a new moon. It's you can't see it out in the sky. The sun covers it up. So the sun, the father, is overwhelming the mother. So that can be somewhat seen here, and I do think that from what I've seen of, you know, what they've said in the news, I think that was probably true. But you know, we also have Rahu here, and this is about success and material things. So she may have felt really hemmed in by the, you know, William's father, as well as, you know, the material life around her. So it's really quite constrictive. So equally, because the moon is also William's mind, he can feel a similar way to that. He can feel hemmed in by the expectations of his father, by the material expectations, so on and so forth. And this can personally affect him, and he can find this really challenging to deal with in some ways. You know, especially with the Sun and Rahu, this is emotional, popular, but, you know, overbearing wife. There can be disruptions to the marriage, because this is all in the 7th house, and because there's problems with the moon, it's another sign that there's issues with women in general. So there can be hard times with the marriage, but there's actually a nice aspect from Jupiter, which is going to give him a little bit of relief from that. But there's a lot of planets sitting in the 7th house, so this is going to be a significant area of his life that is going to take up a lot of his personal time and, you know, willpower. It's something where the light is shone on it, if you understand what I'm saying. He's got a Jupiter and Moon combination, so this is really great, and it can help people give them hope and allow them to resolve conflicts in marriage. So it's not all bad, and this gives a more bright kind of attitude as well, which is really, really helpful. But you know, he still has problem with the Saturn aspect, and you know, he's in the grand cycle of Saturn at this moment in time. It's really prominent, and things are getting him down. Well, of course, you know, we know in the media we can see that, you know, both his father and his wife have cancer. That is a lot to deal with, but unfortunately that is Ardra, and that is Saturn aspect in the moon. It's things that bring sadness, and of course Saturn is aspecting both the moon and the sun, so that's women in his life, and it's his father, and he's probably thinking about his mother around about this time, about, you know, the fear, because Saturn can create fears, especially with Rahu. So those two aspects being highlighted on the moon, it can create irrational fears and worry. You know, both Charles and Kate are undoubtedly getting excellent medical treatment, but he probably will be sitting there worrying, oh my gosh, what if this is going to be my mum all over again? Which is natural, but I can really see that speaking in the chart. So he's going to be in the grand cycle of Saturn until February 2029. The 7th house is also the second born child, and this tells me that Charlotte, will have a lot of power, but she's also equally like William, she's very, very sensitive. But back to William, Rahu here is a lot of links to high society, but there can be tendency to obsessions and, you know, poor behaviours as well. Unsurprisingly, he has an Amara Yoga, which is the combination that gives great property. And of course, he has great property in his family, and lives in quite a lovely place. As I said, he's currently in the dasha of Saturn, but also Rahu. So as what I was saying about Rahu as well, these are the two things that are going to really be prominent in his life, and he's going to be feeling the weight of his mind and of irrational fears, and you know, he's going to feel triggered as well, but you know, it's also going to bring out a lot to do with his career, a lot to do with his marriage. Also, as I said, 7th house is the wife, and 10th house is also another house that represents the father. You know, that equally both of them are highlighted, and there we've got the issues as well. So since 2010, which is when he started in the dasha of Saturn, it's all been around his career. But the subdasha of Rahu, that started in 2023, and that will end in 2026. So that's quite a long period of time for him to feel quite stressed out about this whole thing, and there's stress around career, responsibility, which is understandable. So, you know, during this time there can be potential difficulties with women in general, but, you know, there can be a lot of mental turbulence as well. And I did read an article somewhere, I don't know how true it is, and I think it was like a rubbishy newspaper where they were saying Prince William hits the bottle, and you think, oh crikey. So I don't know how true that is. It's probably a load of old junk, but there we go. So looking into his D10, because this is what, you know, we're all interested in, and you can see that in August 2022 to October 2023 he was in the Saturn Mars, and in his D10 this not only highlighted his first house, but it also alighted the 10th house, and that has Mars in it as well. So these two houses are going to be really, really prominent. And this would have been at a time where he would have been incredibly likely to get a promotion, and of course he did. See, had I looked at this before, I would have said, oh well, you know, Charles is gonna abdicate. I almost said abscond. Abdicate, and he will be put into the big C. But that didn't happen. But he did get the promotion to Prince of Wales. Yes, Prince of Wales. Because obviously the Queen died September 2022. So that was a month after he moved into that all of this started to happen. And of course his father became king. So when could he possibly become king? You know, looking at his dashas, I do think that between July 2032 and May 35, there is a possibility there. But if that is the case, you know, I'd say, you know, our current King Charles, you know, he's going to be okay, and he's going to continue working for a while longer. So this is a support to say that his health will be fine. But thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, send me a comment. I love to read your comments. And thank you very much. Goodbye.